All right, we're going to go into the last version of our Italian Vetterlis. That is the Italian Vetterli 1870/87/15. It may go, that last number may go 17 or whatever, but 15 in the book is officially what they kind of call it. So we'll go with that. And how this version of the gun came about was, as we know, covering this, the 1880s, 1890s was where military firearms made huge advances in technology, and had smokeless powder, designs, everything. Now the Vetterli gun, well, pretty well for 1869, 1870, was pretty much an advanced weapon system. Okay, it's just technology changed so fast, the gun itself became obsolete quickly, like 20, 30 years. It's obsolete, not usable. So as we know, the Italians started off with a single shot. All right, and they had a little bit more powerful cartridge than the Swiss did. They kind of like that. The Italians will pick a design, and then they go and they kind of make their own ammunition to their likings. Okay, this has been like with this, and then again they did it with the Carcano. So then they had the war in 1877 between Russia and Ottoman Empire, where repeating guns kind of made a difference in one battle. The Russians still won the war, but it was quite difficult for them when they came into the siege of Plevna, where the Turks pulled a surprise on them. When they got up close, they used Winchester 1866 rifles and cut down a vastly larger force using repeaters. So this created a crisis in the military community, and everybody was trying to upgrade to repeaters, and the 1870/87 Vetterli was the answer the Italians did by adding on a 4-shot magazine and modifying the gun. Well, this was fine, but again, 1887 is the model. So this was satisfactory for them, but by 1891, the Italians were looking to develop a smokeless powder gun, and the Carcano started being issued probably, I think, around 1892 or so. They started ramping up production. So these 1887 models, the repeaters, were gradually, like anything, phased out and put into storage. Okay, and it didn't happen overnight. It took years. So if you look from 1891 to 1918, when World War I started, there was a large number of years where most of these guns, they caught up with production. The Italians issued a new arm, and these guns were placed in storage. Okay, so they didn't immediately scrap them or destroy them. They were just put away and held in reserve. So when World War I erupted and the war started, everyone pretty much figured this would be over quick. And unbeknownst to them, it was also the first large-scale global war on an industrial scale. Okay, they used all modern machinery, modern guns, airplanes were used for the first time, you had aviation, bombing, all this weird stuff, and it took them by surprise, and the war kind of became stalemated swiftly. Okay, there were advances in that, but everybody was in fortified positions or mountaintops, and the war got stalemated and turned into just basically a drawn-out bloodbath. Well, none of these countries prepared for this. Okay, they didn't expect the war to last so long, and they did not expect it to go so horribly wrong. And many countries were losing men and equipment on a large scale. Okay, be it Italy, Austria, Russia, The United States, when we entered the war, late in the war, we were unprepared. We ran out of rifles. There were not enough Springfield 30-06s to go around, and they couldn't produce them fast enough. So we ended up going in there with the Enfield style, the pattern 14s or whatever, was basically the main rifle that American soldiers used, because Winchester and Remington were making them already for the British. So all they had to do is swap over from 303, change the tooling, redesign it a little, and it was in 30-06, and that's what we were issued in large numbers. Okay. So likewise, the Italians had this older gun storage. So how it came about was, with the losses and that, everybody was running short of firearms and men. Okay, when you had a battle that lasted 2 weeks and you lost 65,000 troops, you also lost 65,000 rifles along with them. So now the problem comes, everybody's running out of weapons and they can't make them fast enough to keep the war going. So the Russians specifically, okay, they were allies with the Italians at the time. The Russians were in bad shape. The Tsar was losing control, he was losing troops, he was losing equipment, and the Russians approached the Italians. Now the Italians were assessing their situation. They had a ton of these 70, 87s in reserve. So the Russians said, hey, we need rifle. We'll take any type of rifle you got. And the Italians go, all right, we got these older guns. We'll give them, either they gave them or sold them to them as aid. They either gave them as aid or they sold the Russians these older guns. They made a deal where they were going to ship these guns to them. And there was some kind of a commotion. The Russians did get this Vetterli model here, the 10 millimeter, and they were issued them. The Russians did use them during the war in the original old caliber. It's not a black powder cartridge gun at this time. Ever since 1890, this thing was issued with smokeless powder and a jacketed bullet. Okay? It was just the technology and all that wasn't there, but it was a usable weapon. This weapon was a lot better as it is than no weapon at all. So the Italians made a deal with selling the Russians, or whatever the deal was. They were sending these to the Russians with ammo. Then the Italians realized they're running out of guns themselves. You know, fighting in the Alps there with Austria, there were horrible losses and stalemated up in the mountains, and just on both sides they lost thousands and thousands of men. So now the Italians go, we got a problem. We don't have enough rifles for our people on the front. So what they did is they stopped selling or giving these guns to the Russians, and they come up with this gun up here on the top as an emergency situation. They took these rifles, modified them, and because, you know, 10 millimeter is a hell of a lot bigger than 6.5 millimeter or 10.4, so they figured out a way with something called the Salerno process of resleeving the barrels to another caliber. Okay, I'll go on a separate video and explain this Salerno process in detail, but what they did is they took their guns, they modified them, resleeved these out, changed the caliber from 10.4 millimeter to the 6.5 Carcano, and then they swapped out different parts and pieces. They remodified the gun and reconfigured it to fire the 6-round clips, just like the Carcano rifle. And these guns were issued to rear troops and used in an emergency condition. But the strange thing is, this modification to 6.5 was eventually probably sent to the colonies post-war, and these rifles were in use in North Africa. The British captured a ton of these in Ethiopia. All the way up until World War II, these guns were in use. And also, when you're collecting Vetterlis, okay, the Italian Vetterlis, we have our different ones. This is going to be the most commonly found gun. There are versions of this in a Troop Special, cavalry carbine, and I believe even some single shots were modified somehow into this. The most common variation of this gun you're going to find is this rifle. Okay, it's not very expensive, about $3.5 is the going rate at this point in time. Most of them that I have, if you clean the bar out, they didn't see a lot of use, and they're in you can find these in relic condition all the way up to something fairly nice. Or like these are in average, I'd say excellent condition, good condition. So they're common. They're not too expensive at this point in time. So if you want to cut your teeth on the Vetterli system, this one here may be the way to get a start. See if you like, studying history and that. There are versions of this gun that are probably rarer than any of the other Italian Vetterlis, like the carbine converted to 6.5. I've never seen one up for sale. I have seen Troop Specials come up a few years ago. So like 4 or 5 years ago, some people had them up there on the gun broker, and they went for like $800-900 a little bit, and I didn't know much about them at the time. And before I stopped dropping $800 or $900 on something, I better know what the hell I'm buying. So, and I've never seen like 2 of them come up. They went high and fast in the auction on the gun broker, and I've never seen another one offered again or anywhere in the past 5 years. I've never seen the carbine version offered anywhere. So, even though this is a fairly common gun, there are rarer versions of it. Now, another thing, be wary of these. When these came in back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of them were welded shut because another big question is, are these safe to fire standard 6.5 ammunition? Now, I've made a couple videos already where I fire my cast bullet, which is a reduced load to begin with. I fire my cast bullet in it and it's safe. I had no ill effect, no problems. A lot of people go and take factory ammo, PPU ammo, dump out half the powder, reseat the bullet and fire it. If you want to do that, great, but I think that you should more or less go with something you hand loaded and work the load up and get decent results. So yes, they can be fired. Are there people that fire them with off-the-shelf ammo? I believe maybe so. Okay, so the thing is, there is a question of safety, but you can shoot these guns if you hand load or use the appropriate ammunition in here, something with a reduced charge. So that can be done too. So another thing to be warned about, when they brought these in, because they were deemed unsafe in the old days, you will find a lot of these with the chambers welded shut. They actually sold these old guns as a wall decoration. Literally, I'm not kidding. My father had a friend that had one of these on a big plaque on a dining room wall, and I believe that gun had the chamber welded shut, so you couldn't pull it off the decorative mounting and try to shoot it. So be leery, because I've seen a couple of them show up on the gun broker where the guy kind of really doesn't tell you that the chamber's welded shut, and once they weld it shut, you're never going to replace it. I mean, if that arced into the receiver and that, the damage is beyond. So unless you're stripping the gun down for parts, be careful. Make sure that you don't have somebody will say, well, there's something that looks like it plugged in the chamber, that it's welded shut. All right. So that's something you got to watch out for. But for you guys that are beginning collectors, this might be the model to start with if you want to branch into the older stuff like the Vetterli. This is a World War I gun, and actually was used in limited forms up to World War II, so that will fall into your collection if you're collecting World War I, World War II rifles. So it is something to think about. And again, this I'm going to do a series. What we're going to do is we're going to take a side-by-side comparison real close and look at the two guns, how it was modified, and then I'll cover each thing, like the sights. They opened up, they machined the receiver out again. They changed the magazine system, and they had to carve out some more of the stock. So there are several different things that were modified from the 7087 model until this 7087/15 model. Again, it was a overhaul. Okay. So that's my intro, and like I said, I'll make the videos a little shorter and cover each thing. And once I wrap this up, I will look at, in general, across all of them, like stock markings and on a Knox form flat, the different markings and that. That'll all be in separate videos discussing that later on. But right now we're going to look at the difference between the two models and how the conversion went on. So next video we're going to look at the two guns, do an overview, then go over each point in them. Okay.